Hi everyone, it's John from What Up, and welcome back to another video. This will be my Rings of Power Episode 2 review, and if you're new to the channel and you don't know what we do here, we cover Wheel of Time show news, so anything and everything to do with Wheel of Time. So if you like that sort of thing, make sure you subscribe to the channel, but we are also branching out. So I'm doing these Rings of Power reviews every week as a new fan. So basically I've read Tolkien about 25 years ago in high school. I watched the Peter Jackson movies, I watched the Hobbit movies. Unfortunately, I didn't like those ones. So I knew a little bit of the lore, knew a little bit of how things work, but it's all fuzzy and foggy in my old brain. So this is pretty much me coming as a very inexperienced or a new fan, and I wanted to do reviews on something that I didn't know much about, because my ideas and things that should be aren't really influenced by things I've read or things that I think I should know. So it's kind of neat, it's refreshing to do it this way, and let's face it, there are a ton of hardcore Tolkien fans who love the show. There are a ton of hardcore Tolkien fans who hate the show. But the majority of the viewers, by and large, are people like myself, either who read Tolkien and are fantasy fans, but maybe a long time ago, they're not real experts in it, or have never read Tolkien and just like fantasy shows. And this review is coming from that perspective. Now, a couple of housekeeping things before we get into the review. The first one is, be prepared. I am going to start covering the Cosmere adaptation shortly as well. So, some of you may be surprised, but Brandon Sanderson did announce that there will be a Cosmere adaptation, and more information on that will come by the end of the year. And I'm going to cover that from inception right up until they film and release it, just like I did with the Wheel of Time, because I'm also a huge Cosmere fan. So watch for that here in the channel. And the second thing is, I want to thank all of you new people to the channel, the new fans, the new people that are watching, the new subscribers, because you found us through Rings of Power. Now, every Sunday I do the live after party on Fellowship of the Fans. A few people have messaged me saying they saw me there and they found my channel that way, but a ton of people, and we're talking dozens of messages in the last 2 weeks, have been people who didn't know about the Wheel of Time at all. They didn't realize that the adaptation existed until they watched Rings of Power and saw an ad for the Wheel of Time just before it. And then they started to join the Wheel of Time fandom. So they started talking to people on Twitter and Reddit, Facebook, and they found some YouTube channels like myself, The Dusty Wheel, Unraveling the Pattern, and they kind of integrated themselves into the fandom as new fans. And I want to thank Rings of Power for that, because let's face it, the Wheel of Time came out. It was at the time the biggest hit on the streaming service they had, the #1 show on Prime Video, but the marketing for it was abysmal. It was in spite of the marketing, not because of it. It could have been much bigger, much better. Now, I know I've gotten a couple of messages from you folks, I've mentioned this before, saying, but there were billboards. But they did some things. Absolutely. I'm not saying there was no marketing. I'm saying it was bloody terrible. They didn't do a good job of it. They didn't treat it like some of their other A-list properties they had. They didn't do a lot of different things. There's still no merchandise. There was no boxes from Amazon. There was a bunch of different stuff. There was very few ads run. Very few people knew about it. And that's kind of showing now, because it's gotten a second win in views from people who had no idea it existed until they watched the Rings of Power, rather. So there's that. All right, so now we're going to get into the review. How it's structured is this. I'm going to do a spoiler-free review where I talk about the episode, give my thoughts on it without spoiling anything at all, give you guys a spoiler warning, and then at that point I'll do a synopsis of the episode and talk about things in detail and show you some clips of different things I liked and I didn't like. Because, yeah, there were some things about this I didn't like. So, we're going to talk scoring first. Now, if you remember back to my episode 1 review, I scored episode 1 at 9.5 out of 10. So, I was impressed, I was blown away, it was absolutely amazing, but I gave it a pass for some things, because it was a setup episode. Very first episode of the series, it has to set up some things, it has to do certain things, it's not going to advance the plot a whole lot, it's going to introduce a ton of different things, and that was mainly done by the end of the episode. Not 100%, but mainly done. So, I gave it a pass. This particular episode, episode 2, I enjoyed more than I enjoyed episode 1, so I liked it better, but I'm still scoring it lower because I'm no longer giving it a pass. So even though I thought it was better, I'm scoring this one at 8.5. Now, it lost points for 2 separate things. The first thing was pacing, and the second thing was some of the actors and actresses' chemistry on screen. Now, we're going to get into both those things in a second, but I want to start off by saying about some of the things I did like. Now, the cinematography in this particular episode was absolutely beautiful. They seem to shift styles based on where they're at in the world and which characters they were filming, whether it be above ground, underground, out in the open. I really enjoyed that. There were a couple of areas where I sensed that they took some inspiration from some classic horror directors. I definitely seen some John Carpenter in there. I saw some Sam Raimi for sure. I've heard other people say they've saw some Hitchcock in there. I'm not a big Hitchcock fan, but I believe them because he inspired a lot of the other classic horror directors. I really enjoyed the way they shot this. Nothing felt empty. Nothing felt out of place. The editing was done very well. The VFX and the special effects in this, immaculate. The creatures, to the magic, to the other things we've seen on screen, it didn't feel out of place. It didn't feel fake. They melded all of the background stuff into the foreground really well. So they took the real and the unreal and they blended them together. It was almost like being in the Matrix. I thought they did a fantastic job with this because I hate CG. I hate all of that stuff. I'm more of a practical effects person. I'd rather built sets, but if they seem to fit or if I can't really tell, I'm happy. And I was very happy with this episode for that. The pacing. Now, reading into the pacing. The pacing is the first thing that was a little bit off in this one. We have 4 very distinct storylines that start to emerge during this episode, and they weren't advanced very much at all. So a lot of things happened, but none of the characters' stories really advance that much. And now I know that'll probably change in episode 3 and 4 and beyond because they're still setting some things up. But at this point, I was expecting maybe a couple of more big things to happen, and we didn't really get that. There was only some urgency from one of the storylines, maybe 2, I guess, if you consider it that way, but I didn't really like them. So yeah, the pacing on this one was still a tad slow for me, so it lost some points there. And the last thing we'll talk about is chemistry. So I want to get this out of the way by saying it's not the actor-actress's fault for some of the storylines where the chemistry between them on screen is terrible, because they're in other storylines as well, and they do a fantastic job. It's just the people they're on screen with. I didn't like it. It felt strained. It felt kind of awkward. So 2 of the storylines did very well with the actors and actresses and their chemistry and the way they fit together and how comfortable they were on screen. 2 of the other ones, not so much. It was a little awkward. It felt like I was watching something that was forced rather than it felt natural. It took me out of the immersion a little bit and actually took me back a step and went, ooh, didn't like that at all. So that's where it lost all the points, was the pacing and some of the chemistry between the cast. I'm going to say 8.5 out of 10 for this. So now, I'm going to give you folks a spoiler warning because we're going to get into the actual meat and potatoes of the episode. So spoiler warning, in the next part of the review, I will talk about the actual episode itself and give examples and show some small clips. So if you haven't seen episode 2 of The Rings of Power, be forewarned, I'm going to ruin plot points, character arcs, and all kinds of other stuff from it. All right, so in this particular episode, there were some great things, there were some not so great things, and we're going to talk about them in detail now, but a quick synopsis of the episode. You have Elrond and Celebrimbor getting together at the beginning of the episode. They're talking about building this giant forge to craft some really cool shit, and they need a big army of people to do it. The king can't do it for them because he doesn't have the people. Elrond says, I know a dwarf, let's go talk to him. They go to the Dwarven Halls, and Elrond finds out that his relationship with Prince Durin has soured over the last 20 years that he hasn't seen him, and they spend the episode kind of repairing it, which were some of my favorite scenes. Then you have Bronwyn. Now, Bronwyn, she is with her other human villagers. They find out that the orcs are actually tunneling underneath their town because the last town that they went to was completely destroyed and there was no one there. I assume they're all taken to be eaten. I don't know how that works. Do orcs eat people? I assume they do. And she goes back to warn the village. They don't believe her. And it isn't until an orc actually busts through the floor and attacks her and her son that the villagers kind of believe it, because she very uneloquently, I guess is the best way to put it, kills the orc and brings the head to the innkeeper, who I assume is probably also the mayor. And pretty neat scenes there. Really like those scenes. They were really well done. Then you have the scenes with Bronwyn. Now, Bronwyn is left at sea. She finds the floating wreckage of another ship. She interacts with some humans. They find out she's an elf. They're pretty upset about it. They chuck her into the water because a giant sea worm comes after them. Really cool thing. I don't know if it's a type of a whale or a dragon or how things exist like that in the Lord of the Rings continuity, but really neat. A lot of them get killed and eaten, except for one gentleman. Now, the last few scenes with Bronwyn and this gentleman are scenes that I don't like again. I find there's almost no chemistry, even though I think that they're going to end up as love interests together. I believe that. It's probably how it's going to go, but I don't like it. They seem very forced. I didn't like the way they interact together. That's what happens there. And then you have the Harfoots. So that's the fourth prong of the story. You have the Harfoots. The Harfoots are having some problems, I guess is the best way to put it. The stranger is there. He's trying to explain what he wants and what he needs to Nori, and Nori really just doesn't understand. But as she's helping him, her father breaks his ankle, and the way they frame the shots, it almost seems like the stranger caused it. There seems to be a whole lot of bad things happening around the stranger, but they're not really putting two and two together quite yet. Some really great scenes, some really great interaction with people, and I really enjoyed it. So now, we're going to show you some of these scenes that I maybe didn't enjoy so much, and we'll talk about why. All right, so the very first one we're talking about here is Elrond and Celebrimbor. This is the first set of characters on screen that, in my opinion, had very little chemistry. I didn't believe that they were trying to work together. Didn't believe that they were trying to do anything together. It just felt forced and unnatural to me. I didn't like it. Very awkward in the way it is. And it's not the actor's fault, because later on, and we're going to show this clip in a second, when Elrond's interacting with the dwarves, it's amazing. The chemistry there is immaculate. Then you have the scenes with Galadriel and this gentleman right here. Like I said, I believe he's probably going to be her love interest, but again, the chemistry isn't there. It's forced. He's supposed to be angry with her, but I don't believe it. I don't see it in his face or his eyes. And she's kind of the same way. They're acting like a couple petulant children, in my opinion. I don't like these scenes at all. I'm kind of upset that I think that they're going to go in the route that she's going to have him as love interest, because he's going to lead her to some orcs, some orc armies that have destroyed his homelands, and I think they're going to be spending some time together, and I don't want them to. I didn't like the way they interacted. I'd rather her to be on her own and kind of do things on her own and be the badass she is. But again, my opinion, maybe their interactions will get a bit better as the season goes on. But that's a hope. And then you have these, the Harfoots and the Stranger. These were really well acted, really well. Like, these were amazing. The chemistry between all the characters on screen, I felt it was real. I felt it was warm. I liked watching these scenes. In fact, I'd watch just the Harfoot show with the Stranger. Could be a half-hour comedy, and I watch that every single day. I'm really impressed with how these are working, really impressed with how the actors and actresses handle these shots. And then this is the dwarf scenes. So this is where Elrond really shined. He gets along with the dwarves. There's a lot of chemistry here. Now, to be fair, the actor that plays Elrond is still pretty stoic and unemotional, but the dwarves themselves, they carry the scenes. They do such a good job with it. I'm really, really impressed with it. I can't wait to see more of the Dwarven Kingdom and how they interact with other characters, because let's face it, other than the Harfoots, the dwarves are my favorite characters in the entire series so far. They're really well done, really animated, and I just can't get over how well it's acted and done with all of the CG around them. Like, it's just absolutely phenomenal. Now we're going to get into a couple of different sections here. So I mentioned some horror elements. I really liked the way they're portraying the orcs and the way the orcs are on screen, because every time there's an orc on screen, every time there's something bad happening, things go a little bit dark, they get a little bit cramped. It's a little bit tense. There's multiple small shots. It's really reminiscent of John Carpenter or Sam Raimi, like I said earlier. I really liked this, especially when you see the hands come out of the roots here and they grab the elf and they haul him back into the darkness. Gave me chills. I watched the scene probably a half dozen times. Again, one of my favorite scenes in the entire the second episode. Really, really well done. And then you have the Dwarven Kingdom. The Dwarven Kingdom is immaculate. This is the thing I was talking about. They're blending the CG in the background with a lot of the foreground acting, and they do such a good job with it that you know this isn't real. This isn't a built set like I would like, but it is very, very well done and beautiful and integrated so well that even though I intellectually know that it's make-believe and CG, it looks real to me, and I'm happy the way they blended it. And then you have this. You have the magic here at the end, and it's not just magic, but it's also foreshadowing. She says that the fire doesn't burn. I don't know much about Tolkien lore, but I have caught the couple things where fire doesn't burn in the presence of evil. It's a stranger evil. I have no idea. There's a lot of people guessing who he may be. My guess is he's probably Sauron, so we'll put that out there now. Maybe this is Sauron. Maybe it's the Balrog. I don't know. There's really not many other bad guys that I know the names of. I know he's probably not Morgoth. Maybe he is. I don't know. But I know the CG for this stuff. I know the way they handled the magic was all really well done. You can tell they put a ton of money into this. It's absolutely immaculate and amazing. Here, when all the fire shoots up, it goes around, the wind is blowing. The real stuff with all the CG in the background was blended so well that I couldn't tell what was real and what was fake. And all the rocks rising up, you know that's fake. You know it is. But it's done so well. And then when it all snuffs out and just kind of lands down again, such a good way to end that shot. Really well done. very impactful. I get nothing but great things to say about all the Harfoot and Stranger scenes. I get nothing but great things to say about all the Dwarven scenes. They're definitely my favorite. Galadriel scenes so far, I'd rather see her alone than with that human. And Elrond, don't have him interact with the elves. There's too many stoic people on the screen at once. Have him interact with the dwarves or the Harfoots or someone fun. That's where I think his character shines the most. So anyway, yeah, 8.5 out of 10, mainly due to pacing and those couple awkward character interactions, in my opinion. But let me know in the comments down below what you folks think. Are you happy with the second episode? Do you like it better than the first? Do you agree with some of the sentiments I have? Now remember, I'm not a Tolkien fan. I don't know much about the lore, but I did enjoy the series so far. So thank you so much for sticking with me here to the very end, and here's to many more.